there, and welcome to Charlotte Prep's Portrait and Diversity podcast. Each episode, we invite community members who live and breathe our four pillars of respect, integrity, perseverance, and courage to speak about their sources of inspiration, their memorable life experiences, and why diversity in thought and culture can create empathetic leaders and innovators. This month, we focus on sustainability and action. Our hosts, Maha and Athena Woodward, speak with Raleigh Sauls, a prep parent and an environmental engineer who shares what she is doing, personally and professionally, to push sustainable solutions forward, why anyone can pursue opportunities in environmental protection, and how we translate activism into action. Maha and Athena also discuss with our Director of Community Life what it means to be a young person facing threats to our environment and the challenge of managing and balancing fear with positive action.
Hi, it's so nice to be speaking with you today. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. Yes, it's great to be here. My name is Raleigh Sauls. My wife, Kayleen, and I have an almost 3-year-old Brooks. He's in the pre-primary class with Miss Bethel, Miss Rebecca, and Miss Maite. And we love the community feel at Charlotte Prep and appreciate the Montessori education.
Can you speak a little bit about your heroes, both in your field and in your personal life?
Well, I have one specifically, and that would be my mom. My mom had this immense can-do attitude, especially as a woman. In her mind, if a man could do it, she could do it, and she proved that over and over again. As part of this, I grew up doing a lot of hands-on projects with her, like woodworking, irrigation, plumbing, even changing the oil in our boat. And we were always building, fixing, and learning how to do things together. But she also taught me how to change things, and that if I wanted to see a change, how I could make that happen. Many times these were traditionally male-dominant projects, and this instilled in me that I could do anything, but especially in areas where I may not conventionally be expected to be seen.
How did you decide to get into engineering, and more specifically, environmental engineering?
So it was a very roundabout way. I grew up on a commercial dairy farm in Central Florida, and some of our big business decisions were based on government regulations and policies. But I also grew up in a family whose hobbies revolved around the natural world. Vacations took us to natural parks, rainforests, beaches, places where you're surrounded by this incredible natural beauty. We loved water skiing, canoeing, and generally just being outside. So I had this vast love for the natural world, but I also saw how regulations and policies affected day-to-day life and business. So I kind of saw myself as someone who could better bridge the gap between regulators and business. So I went to college for environmental economics and policy, and I had planned to go to law school or be involved in policy making, but I didn't really have a clear vision of what that would look like. From there, I just followed opportunities that came up to learn more in my field, explore new areas, and get involved.
So what kind of work are you primarily involved in?
So I work for Nucor. We're a steel manufacturer headquartered in Charlotte. We're the largest steel producer in the U.S. We're a Fortune 139 company with $20 billion in sales in 2020. We have over 26,000 teammates working at over 300 facilities in North America. And so as a steel manufacturer, we make steel. And the way that we do that is we melt scrap metal in an electric arc furnace. And so the basics for doing that are like you have a huge bowl and you fill it with tons of scrap metal, literally tons of scrap metal. And then we put in an electric probe and it melts this metal at almost the temperature of lightning. So you can imagine this huge bolt coming in and it turns the metal into liquid form. It looks like lava, and then we pour it out and cast it, roll it, turn it into products. So as part of this process, we use all of the scrap metal. We are North America's largest recycler. And our steel is made up of 71% recycled content. But I think the really cool thing here is that every product and every ton of steel we make is 100% recyclable at the end of its useful life. So this means that the steel we're making today can be completely recycled decades down the road and made into a new product. And if you look around, you'll see our products everywhere. They're in everything from the new high-rises going up uptown to Teslas driving down the road, stadiums, bridges, military vehicles, solar paneling, windmills. We literally build the world around us. So at Nucor, I wear 2 hats. The first is in compliance and permitting. So manufacturing can have an impact on the environment. And we have a lot of environmental permits overseeing each facility in three big areas: air, water, and waste. And one example of this is on the air side. So the building that houses the electric arc furnace where we're melting steel, all the air that travels through there comes out and goes through what's essentially a gigantic air filter. And this collects all the particulate created in the process. And what it does is it allows for the air quality outside after this process to be just as good as it started. There's no degradation there. So for permitting, I work with environmental agencies in our facilities on what these permits say, and I define what is put into place. Nucor is adhering to and going above and beyond what these permits require. And I also know this because I oversee our environmental compliance audit program. So we audit each facility to see what their permit states and to ensure we're holding ourselves to the highest level of environmental quality. So the second hat that I wear is in sustainability. And I'm helping Nucor as we're becoming a more sustainable steel manufacturer. We are the greenest steel manufacturer in the U.S., but we're also setting greenhouse gas targets and defining a path to ensure we hit them. We're monitoring, evaluating, investing in new technologies to further reduce our greenhouse gas intensity. We're supporting new wind and solar generation. We're incorporating technologies and advancements that help make steel stronger and lighter. And one example of this is in cars. I recently bought a new car. It's an SUV. And the car model that I bought is 300 pounds lighter than the previous generation. 300 pounds doesn't sound like a whole lot in a vehicle, but it really reduces your gas emission needs, it improves your fuel economy, and it also reduces the life cycle emissions coming out of that vehicle. So it's significantly more sustainable, and that's all because of the 300 pounds reduction is from an advancement in metal making.
Awesome. So you guys are obviously super committed to sustainability, which is like all that we're hearing. So in the current like state of today, is it kind of stressful to do what you do because you know like how much pressure is riding on you for the future sort of the world?
That's a good question. That's a really good question, actually. So there's a lot of opportunity, I guess, for sustainability efforts to be improved, right? So that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm kind of the eternal optimist here. And so we're doing a lot to hit all of these goals. We're already hitting the Paris Climate Accord. Like I said, we're setting greenhouse gas targets. So we've hit some of the low-hanging fruit there, but we are doing a lot to get there. And then I hope by being the leader in our industry, but also in manufacturing in general, that many other people were sort of laying the foundation for others to follow behind us and be able to set those goals and hit those targets too.
A quick follow-up there. What do you think, are there like lots of casual ways that we can just improve our lifestyles to be more sustainable, and are there just small ways we can do that in our lives?
100%. So I think the first thing we can do is really look at our personal footprint, and I kind of think that's what you're asking here. Look at ourselves and how can we improve our lives? And I think there are a couple of easy areas there. The first is sort of looking at what we eat. Where does our food come from? How is it grown? How far away is it? But then also, how much of it are we eating? Are we wasting a lot of food? Are we throwing it away? Like if we buy the greenest kale in the world, but we end up throwing it away, the whole process there was such a waste. I think we should be looking at maximizing our opportunity to recycle on the personal level, right? There's recycling, there's composting. I think that of all the garbage that we create in our lives, the actual trash going to the landfill should sort of be the smallest part of that. I think we can all be very water conscious, buying efficient appliances, but also just turning off the water when you brush your teeth. And then also sort of evaluating what kind of unnecessary chemicals are we using in our life? Are we spraying a lot of stuff in our lawns? Are we spraying to kill the mosquitoes, which is also killing the bees, which is, having this downstream effect on everything? So I think there are a lot of things we can do in our lives to make a big impact.
Awesome, yeah. How do heavy industries such as your own work with communities and work towards sustainability? And how do those industries define sustainability?
So I can't define sustainability for all of the industries, but I can speak to me and to Nucor. So my definition of sustainability is meeting our needs without negatively impacting future generations. I don't want the world to be worse off because I existed and because I consumed. So at Nucor, for us, sustainability means always working towards long-term success, not for short-term gains. And it means recognizing where our strength comes from and continuously investing in the future. So essentially, focus on success of the business while minimizing our environmental impact. On the environmental side, that means Nucor is committed to supporting the continued growth of clean power generation in the U.S., and we're big supporters of wind and solar generation. It means exploring the feasibility of capturing and storing CO2 emissions, which is carbon sequestration, or literally pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. And it's also monitoring, evaluating, and investing in new technologies in steelmaking to further reduce our greenhouse gas intensity. But it's also smaller things. It's like fleet modernization, which allows us to save money in fuel costs and maintenance, but it's like solar initiatives. It's adding panels on buildings. It's having power options for teammates to plug in their electric vehicles. It's constantly working towards emission reductions. And if you look at pictures from decades ago of steel mills, you'll see them surrounded by pollution, but that's not at all the case today. We're North America's largest recycler. We are already hitting these benchmarks for the Paris Climate Agreement. We're number 7 on the list of top corporate renewable energy buyers in the U.S. And like all of us, heavy industry is looking to recycle, reduce waste, reuse, and all of our facilities have initiatives to do the same thing. And so for us, one area of focus would be water use. We're very water wise. We continue to clean water, to recycle water, and to reuse it instead of bringing in fresh water. And one example of that is at a facility we have in Gallatin, Kentucky. And we're going through a permitting process right now to allow us to use some recirculated water on some scrubbers, which will save us 15,000 gallons of water a day. And that equates to the water use of about 150 households each day. So I'm very proud of the work that I do, and I'm very proud of the work that we do.
So I'm sure you know about obviously all the like gender disparity in the STEM field and how that's been an issue, but is sort of like steadily declining. So with that being said, how do you think we can encourage students from all walks of life to pursue the sciences and engineering? And why do you think it's been difficult in the past?
That's a good question. I think you can encourage people by getting involved early, right? Understanding, like, you guys are at such a great age to see sort of the science and how it's involved in all of our lives every day. So find out what interests you and dig into it. I think we sometimes stereotypically see the sciences and engineering in a limited scope of view. Like when I first hear science and engineering, I think of a microscope and a calculator. But my day-to-day is not sitting at a computer crunching numbers. I'm working side by side with facilities. I'm traveling a lot. I'm interacting with leadership and supporting decisions that have long-term impact. So when I look at the backgrounds of everyone involved in environmental at Nucor, they range the full gamut. They're lawyers, civil engineers, biologists, economists. They're just such vast fields. And I think the realization of these fields impact everything in our lives, and that will continue to spur interest and keep momentum going because they're needed, and they're needed more and more every day.
What opportunities in environmental sciences and sustainability have really grown recently, and how can students prepare themselves for those?
There are so many opportunities in environmental sciences. With regards to sustainability, we've been hearing the word sustainability for a long time, but there weren't really that many jobs around it, just a lot of talk and kind of figuring it out. Now it seems as though corporations and companies are recognizing their role and seeing how they can incorporate sustainability into their business practices, which is opening up so much opportunity in this field. And there are many highly desired economic positions and economic generators in these fields. There are so many ways to support the economy while being a good steward for the earth. So, as sort of an example of that, steel making is a very energy intensive field. While we use the most efficient process, it takes a lot of electricity to melt steel. And this has historically come from coal-powered power plants. So the next big questions in our field are how we transition to more renewable energy with the ability to need these huge bursts of energy at one time? Does this come from like massive battery storage? Does it come from changes within the grid? And these are all questions that don't have answers yet. So this is sort of an ever-changing field, and some of the jobs your generation will be doing don't even exist yet. So I would just encourage everybody to keep learning, to get involved, and to grab opportunities as they present themselves and go after what you want.
With going after what you want, are you involved in a lot of community work? And like, has that sort of driven you into your field?
Yes, I've shown some leadership in community work, and a lot of the community work that we're involved in is where our facilities are, right? It's getting involved in the local community there and having a big impact in those places. It's educating local and state government officials and the community on the positive impacts we're bringing to the area. It's working with local schools and helping them provide curriculum to train people for our facilities. In my side, it's ensuring we're going above and beyond with our environmental compliance. And then I'm also just constantly promoting the industry as a long-term viable and environmentally friendly option for building and construction.
How has community building and service been a part of your messaging to kids or families you know or work with?
So in areas where we're located, community building is a huge part of who we are, particularly in rural areas where we are a large, if not the largest employer. We support schools, kids groups, colleges, universities. But I have two examples there. And one is at local colleges, we actually help create majors and curriculum to support education and training for future teammates. But in some areas, we even have what's called Nucor Steel University. And we pay qualified students to go to school, and we guarantee them jobs after graduation. So as a large, high-paying employer, we feel it's our duty to improve the community and support the folks who live there.
This is a question about something that I'm closely connected with. So I'm sure you know right now about all the different awareness that's going on primarily through social media for a lot of different things. And how do you think we can transition from awareness to action when it comes to sustainability? And have you experienced this? Have you noted like any changes that's been happening from awareness into actual action?
There's a lot of changes going from awareness to action, and that's a great question. And I kind of stem back to what we talked about a little bit. Like, I think the first thing that all of us can do is look at our personal footprint, right? A few things there. What are we eating? Where is it coming from? How is it grown? What are we wasting? What are we throwing away? Food or otherwise. What are we buying and not eating? Are we maximizing our opportunities to recycle? Are we being water conscious? What unnecessary chemicals are we using? Second, and I think this is a big one too, is to really look at where we're buying from. In the US, we have some of the cleanest steel in the world because we have such strong environmental regulations, and this is true for most industries. While there are always improvements to be made, products made in the US have a significantly smaller footprint than those from much of the rest of the world. So know your countries of origins on stuff that you're buying. And then the third thing that all of us can do is hold companies accountable and support companies that support your causes. Companies listen to their customers and they listen to investors. So tell them what you're interested in and what's important to you. I think these are three easy things we can do every day to be the change we want to see. And even kind of a small scale example on something where I work is that all of our facilities have environmental initiatives, but we have a facility, Laurel Steel in Canada, and they have an initiative on site, no plastic. There's no plates, there's no cups, there's no plastic silverware, no plastic bottles. And instead, they're using silverware made from bamboo. And at first glance, this seems like such a small thing. But it has a big impact, and a big part of that is getting everyone thinking about their footprint and how their consumption is affecting the world around them. On a much bigger scale, I would suggest everybody get involved in the sciences and help build the technology that will impact the future. Follow your passion, study in STEM fields.
Thank you. Sort of an additional question. With all the awareness going on today, do you think any of it has the potential to be harmful with like getting misconstrued or anything like with the internet and social media? I mean, there's a lot of quote unquote awareness that is actually, in my opinion, like hurting and taking away from the action. So, do you have an opinion on that?
I do, and I 100% agree with you on that. And part of the issue, I think, with social media or just our news in general is that these are really complicated topics to talk about, right? And so we're so used to listening to something in, a TikTok video or, gosh, even the news cycle. They want to tell you everything that they can in 30 seconds, and it's just not a way to absorb any information. So, I think the best thing for anybody to do is if you're interested in something, study up on it, really read about it from an unbiased source or from multiple sources to better understand things. I think moving from awareness to action is important, but also recognizing that a lot of social media, I think, is kind of activism. And activism does go so far, but it's not really a solution in my mind, right? It may make people more aware, which could cause change, but there's a big difference in action and awareness versus activism.
What do you think is going well in your field, specifically with sustainability in terms of the environment? And what are we managing to do as communities or businesses to fight environmental challenges?
Good question. First, I am an eternal optimist, but I think there is a lot going really, really well. We have improved our country environmentally, the world environmentally over the last 100 years by so much. We're a prosperous world. Our day-to-day lives, yours and mine, are so much better off than they were 100 years ago, and the state of our environmental world is too. If you look at pictures from the early 1900s of steel mills, you would see them surrounded by pollution, but that's not at all the case today. The modern industry is not your grandfather's steel company. The accepted standards are continuously becoming more stringent, and as an industry and as any industry, we're working towards having the least amount of pollution possible. We're always looking for new ways and new technologies, and this will only continue. And again, the U.S. makes some of the cleanest products in the world. Our environmental regulations are working, and companies are being held to strong standards. The science and technological innovations are incredible, and they will continue to have a positive impact on industry and growth. And as far as communities and businesses fighting environmental challenges, I think that companies are really listening to investors and companies and customers more than ever before. Many companies are also more transparent than they ever were before, and they're recognizing impacts on how to reducing their impacts and how important that is for the environment.
Awesome. So, with all that being said, and with all the eternal optimism, which is obviously great, what do you think is not going well?
I think there are a couple of things, and I think you guys brought that up a second ago. But I think the first that is really hard for this topic and not going well at all is the way that we receive our news. The news wants us to think the worst about everything because that's how they get ratings, and they don't take the time to really dive into issues. It's deflating, and it makes it impossible to understand bigger concepts. The second thing, and we kind of hit on this a little bit too, is this idea of activism versus industry. And growing up, it really took me a minute to figure this out. But some of the biggest positive impacts you can have are working with industry on solutions and improvements. We need the products that are being made for buildings, cars, electronics, and we have to find a way to work together on solutions. It's not political, which the media would have us believe. And how do we have advancements in and prosperity in our life while still being good stewards of the earth? I work every day ensuring that we're going above and beyond to produce the greenest steel there is. And the steel is used for things like building clean energy infrastructure. It's making cars lighter to lower life cycle emissions. It's making electric vehicles. So while we're not Tesla, we do make the components in Teslas. And to have an impact, get in and make the changes you want to see. Work for companies that make a difference and support your efforts. Activism makes for easy headlines, but these are complicated issues, far more than any news cycle will dig into. So work to turn your activism into meaningful action.
With that and with all this change coming about, what have been some really innovative or just interesting projects that you've worked on in the sustainability field?
So this is an exciting question. There's so much brain power going into environmental sustainability efforts. On my side, we're supporting new solar power generation. We're supporting new wind generation, both financially, but also we're building a steel mill right now that will be one of the few mills globally capable of building the towers and foundations for offshore windmills. We're capturing and storing CO2 emissions, which is called carbon sequestration, and that's this advanced process of literally pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. We're investing in new technologies, and there are new ideas coming out constantly. So great minds are working to improve processes and technologies, and I can't wait to see what's next and what your generation brings to the table.
Talking about our generation, nice segue. So for the budding leaders at Charlotte Prep, what do you think Maha and I as peers can do right now to create change, and how do you think we can motivate each other more?
That's a really good question. So I think, again, looking introspectively at our footprints, what we can do, I think that each of us can have a huge impact on the world around us, whether we're, engineers working to make huge changes or whether we're literally looking where our food comes from and being water wise with products we're using. Looking at where we're buying, what we're buying, and where we're buying it from. What's the country of origin? We're inherently consumers, so reducing the impact of our consumption, I think, is really important. And I think your generation, has a great impact too on your families, right? Your parents, even your siblings. So then when we talk about motivating each other, I think if your passions are in STEM, follow them. There's so much opportunity in the STEM world right now in sustainability. I can almost guarantee that where you'll be in 15 or 30 years will not be where you envision right now, but it will be something that you're interested in. These are impactful fields that will define the way we work on problems of the future. And I think the other important part is to remember that it's not all doom and gloom. And the older you get, the more you'll realize this. But we can make a difference, and we are making a difference. And I think my final comment on this one is that you can make a difference, and there are a million ways to do this. On a small scale or on a large scale, we all have an impact on our consumption.
I just want to, before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you so much for talking to us. It's been great. Despite our prior technical difficulties, it's definitely worth it hearing everything. Mm-hmm. Your field is just so cool. I mean, it's awesome to hear about it. So thank you so much for putting some time aside to talk to us.
Of course. Thank you. I'm so blessed to be on here today. I'm really grateful for your all's time and your questions. It's an exciting field. I'm excited about it. And I can't wait to see what the future holds from your generation and what you're going to bring to the table to help reduce our environmental impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just so interesting. It's really cool, and it's so important also. So it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you today. Thank you so much.
Of course, ladies, I enjoyed it.
So I'm really excited about this chat that you guys had with Miss Sauls.
Yeah,
she's, as you know, a parent here, and she also works for a large steel company. She's doing a lot in sustainability, and I think it's just really cool to hear from somebody who's pursued like this as a actual career, right? Did you guys have a good chat with her?
Yeah, I think it was great. It was super awesome to talk to her and learn about what she does a bit, and like her motivators and how she grew up and how that factored into what she does today.
Okay.
That's really awesome.
Right. So I'm just really curious. I mean, you had the chance to talk with someone who's involved in sustainability, who's an environmental engineer. And I'm just curious about the age that you're at and kind of where you think, do you feel like sustainability and the environment is something that you and your peers are even thinking about in terms of like where you want to go in life, like your trajectory? I mean, it seems to me like, aside from being probably somewhat lucrative, it's just really important at the moment. I don't know. How do you guys feel about how that might play into life planning for all of you?
Mm-hmm. So I personally, and this is just my opinion, but I do think there is a good portion of people who care about this, who are planning to like base their future and their jobs on this, or even not, like if it's not their full time, doing something partially or just integrating sustainability into day-to-day living. Mm-hmm. Like just small things like, not using plastic straws and using like silicone straws mm-hmm. everywhere, and small things like that, like integrating into day-to-day life. And that's definitely, for me, that's a big thing. And I personally would definitely consider doing something in sustainability in the future, and just like seeing so many youth activists in the climate movement has like really inspired me as a person to like even work on that in the future, possibly. That's definitely something I would consider.
If we don't do enough now, the future's not going to be about sustainability. It's going to be more about survival of what's going to happen to us. So I think that's why it's such a pressing issue for me right now, that I sort of mold my life around sustainability, protest, organizing, all these different things that I feel a responsibility to do now. And
so I'm just curious, kind of when you felt that first, like, fever that you needed to do something.
I mean, I know for me, I felt it in science class, 6th grade. Smartshot played a video of Greta in Sweden, And at that point, I just said, okay, hey mom, I'm gonna skip school every Friday. And I didn't even expect to go. I didn't even think there was any groups throughout Charlotte that were doing anything. I thought it was just you stay home. So that's what I did for a couple weeks. And then I realized when Greg came to Charlotte, I met my current group, XR, speaking and introducing her. So that's when I felt, seeing all of these people younger than me and older than me doing so much more than I'd ever done, I felt sort of a responsibility, like I had to do this now, or else I was, just as bad as the people who were endangering our future anyway.
What are the things that you seem to be gravitating towards? Like, what issues particularly are you guys kind of gravitating towards?
For me, I think it's quite a bit of everything, especially as like a female of color. I think a lot about environmental racism, and how like climate change is disproportionately affecting people of color by like a landslide. And I think about that a lot. I think about, like you said, big corporations like who won't act now, who like I think don't realize that like having something by 2040 is not an okay goal. There's not enough time. Like it's something where like it might be something that needs to transition slowly, but that at this point like there is no time. I think for me it's a lot about a little bit of fear almost, is knowing what might happen in the future and trying to get people to act now. And that's a lot of like, a bit of awareness, but a lot of just activism, like direct action, which I'm hoping to be more involved in the future, like things open back up and stuff like that.
I mean, I would say, like, obviously for some people, and some people who's probably listening to this, activism might come in different forms. It may not necessarily be like a, picket line and signs and or pushing the envelope, right, and breaking rules and so on. It could be something quieter. So what do you think? Like, I'm just thinking even about my own kids. I mean, they're sort of getting used to being here in the U.S. and I think understanding, sort of what the environment is like here, not just literally speaking, but just in terms of, how you get interested in something and how you find your voice. What's the things that people can do, you think, your age, that might be on the quieter side of things, but still might make an impact or a difference? Because I think that's important for some of our listeners, is just they might not want to be necessarily in the forefront, but they want to be able to make a change.
If you truly want to be involved in something, and even if it's on the quiet side, I think just researching and reading and knowing sort of all the different sides of what's going on is a lot more effective than sort of throwing yourself into this really huge ocean of activism. You think you should be doing this and this and this, and
I agree. It is huge. It's a massive. I mean, I think that's intimidating. I mean, even me as an adult, I find it very intimidating to have that pressure of like save the world, right? Like, which is it's just too big. It's too big to chew and digest.
And I think a lot of what happens when people, quote unquote, find out about the climate crisis is like sort of this huge need to throw themselves in, and then they just get burnt out and stop. Because when you see everything that people are doing, you see these 11, 12-year-old organizers on podiums from the thousands of people speaking, quote unquote, saving the whole world. You think, I need to be doing that, or what I'm doing right now is not enough. But, I felt like that for a really long time, being friends with so many amazing people that were doing so many amazing things, like direct action, and me, at home holding my little homemade sign, like, this is not doing anything. But I think the more you shy away from that, the better, because the people that worry that they're not doing enough are doing enough.
Okay.
Just the fact that you're worrying about it means that you're already doing something right.
So interestingly, I mean, the discussion that you had with Sauls, who's a parent here, she's working for a company that's one of the largest recyclers in the world, right? Like they actually, a lot of their products are based, reusing the material. So do you kind of like in your research and things that you're doing, do you sort of feel, and I'm not very well educated with this, so I can't comment myself, but I'm just curious, since you guys are so passionate about this, do you feel that there is some awakening with companies and organizations to change the way they do their business?
So I want to say yes and no. Like
It was a long pause there.
there are
Thoughtful.
some people who definitely are taking action. There are some companies who are doing that, and then there are quite a few companies who are like greenwashing so much, and they're saying that like, oh, they're doing really sustainable things, when in reality they're like, oh yeah, we're doing better than before, but before was not good at all, and now it's just
marginally better.
Yeah, just,
Right.
Yeah, bare minimum on it, and it's not enough. And they're just doing it because they have, people who are telling them that they should be taking action. So they're trying to put into their marketing and their ads. And they're trying to show everybody that they're doing better, but their better is not a significant amount of better that is actually enough to be taking action. And I think just researching that has been a big part of this for me, like getting educated. And also for me, it's been a lot of educating others, my parents, my family.
There is a big part that fear plays, because fear is very, it's.
I mean, yes, fear can be a motivator, but I guess like one of the other things too is what are some of the more positive things, that you can, do you feel like most of the messaging right now around sustainability and, climate change and is too negative? Do you feel like it's a lot of fear versus trying to find another path, another way to frame it?
I think there's a lot of fear.
Yeah.
There are interesting, projects and things that are going on, right? Like that are, especially when we're talking about like developing communities, right, across the world, where you're trying to find self-sustainable ways to keep your community safe, to have access to, resources like, water and so on, and to do that all in a environmentally friendly way. Those are also uplifting stories too, right? I mean, like, I think it's also important for us to make sure that people feel that they can actually also make real serious positive change and to give examples. Have you guys come across some of the more positive commentary, more positive stories out there?
100%. I think there's so much just looking at innovation, but a lot of what comes with talking about the climate crisis is just negative feeling. And I think what it's been for me is anger, like Athena said, a little bit of fear, and even a little bit of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Just hope that, like, yes, this is such a crisis. This is, like, such a big issue. Perhaps if I do my part and help to educate others, if I can educate myself, there's some way that I can help, that I can make a difference. And that little bit of hope has been a big thing for me. And also hearing positive stories everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of hope, it's a lot of anger, and it's a lot of fear.
I know. I think, of course, it's a mix. I want to make sure that, anyone who listens also feels like they have the chance to be part of a positive momentum, right? I mean, and I do think, of course, the fear and the anger is usually what kickstarts lots of things in life. Lots of change, right? Like even just personally, we sometimes get frustrated with ourselves, and then that's enough of a kick in the pants, right? To do something more. And I think those stories are out there, and I think it's going to be up to us to make sure we kind of spread those. So, yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining us this month. Stay tuned for new podcast episodes.